This sync selling sales process has generated over £185 million in closed revenue for over 300 different businesses in 60 different industries. In this video, I am going to walk you through the step-by-step how you can build the same sales process in your business. It's taken from a webinar that I did in the Sync Selling program, where we help founders who are managing sales teams or doing them sales themselves to close more deals, systemize sales success, and scale their sales operations. If you are interested in working with me, there's a link in the bottom where you can book an initial call and find out a little bit more about it. We help anyone who is looking to close more sales, or if your sales team isn't performing quite as well as you know they should be, or if you're looking to hire a salesperson or you're having issues with hiring salespeople, we'll help you with the process that will fix it. By the end of this video, you'll know how to systemize your sales process so that you're not selling by accident. You'll know how to avoid being ghosted so you never get ghosted ever again. You'll know how to keep control of the sales conversations even when put under pressure by prospects, and you'll know how to ensure that you can close the maximum deals possible while spending less time on calls. If you like this sort of content, I really appreciate you subscribing and leaving a comment. Other than that, enjoy the video. I like this session. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I wanted to do this session as it's going to be kind of like an introduction into sync selling, and this session will give context. Everything else that we speak through in part of our engagements, it gives a lens of which to look through. I'll cover each part of the sales process, how we think, and the core slabs. If you can imagine like the 10 commandments written in stone, it's like the main concepts that run through the sync selling program. All of the main core themes, good, in three very distinct component parts. So we have the hook, the wedge, and the match. And also the bonus round, which we don't normally cover, is the net. But 99% of the stuff that we'll talk about, because we're talking about the acquisition of customers, falls into these three parts, which is the hook, the wedge, and the match. And in those three stages, the reason I've grouped in three stages is because there's very different, distinct behavior and aims that happen at each part of that sales process. So the hook, as an example, is by definition, it's everything that happens. So everything that happens before a prospect says, do you know what? Yeah, I'm a little interested in that. I'll put some time in my diary. And then you organize a space and room to have a conversation with the prospect. So that can be any channel: email, LinkedIn, webinars, events, inbound leads. It's the mechanism of which you bring customers to the table and generate enough curiosity and some credibility about what problems you solve and what you can deliver for the prospects in order for them to put some time in their diary. And generally, the one thing to remember in the hook is that all of the messaging should be about the prospect and ideally what they want or the problems that they're trying to solve, as opposed to what you do. I spoke to a founder earlier today, and he was talking about some email templates that he'd spun up. And just as he was describing the email templates, I knew instantly that they didn't work because he said, oh, I just created some emails and I just wanted to tell everyone about our business. Because the prospects don't care. What they do care is what they could potentially get from doing that. And that can be something of gain, or it can be solving a problem. But the most effective messaging and the most effective advertising campaigns, whatever it should be about the prospect, what they're looking to do, what they can experience, what they are going to like, and also the problems that we solve for them. And that is the first part of the sales process. So throughout this program, what we'll be doing is be looking at the messaging and seeing how can we condense the messaging and make it easier for prospects to understand what they can potentially get, or create that curiosity about what they might be able to get to bring them to the table. So it should be more like that, the wedge. And that's the process of gathering information from the prospect. And the reason I call it the wedge is for two reasons. One is because it opens up the conversation, and it's designed, the discovery process is to take, and it'll start off from a place of, don't really know who you are, or whether you can help me or not, or whether we should even be talking. And throughout the process of the discovery phase of the sales cycle, you'll gradually build up trust and credibility. They'll get a feel for what it's like to do business with you. And the whole aim of the wedge is for us to gather information or ammunition or details about what the customer wants to achieve, where they are now, where they want to get to, what's important to them, and where they place value. Because the same solution can be any different, it can be positioned in an infinite number of ways. We can increase the value of the perceived value of our solution by understanding what someone wants to achieve by having that solution. Do they want someone to have this wow factor when they are hosting? Do they want to be the household where the grandkids just where does the prospect place value, and what do they want to see on that? Do they want to, what are they looking to do? Are they under pressure because they're losing tenders because they haven't got the right information? Are they being under pressure to do more for sustainability, but they haven't got the mandate to do it? Understanding the drivers beyond what our product does allows us to position in our product or service in a way that increases the perceived value. And throughout it, more than anything else, I think it's my favorite part of the sales process, the discovery. And I think it's the one part that really is never mastered. You can always ask better questions. You could always ask additional questions. You can always increase the quality of the information that you get from the prospect. And then the match hopefully can take a guess, but the match is saying, okay, well, we understand all this information now. We understand everything about what the customer wants to achieve, everything like that. The match is then when we say, okay, we understand this about your business or about your household or about what you're looking to achieve. This is how our product or service fits in with that. And so the match, I always use a jigsaw puzzle as a kind of fitting in. If we've done the discovery well, and if we've got really good quality information, then it becomes very easy to position our product or service as a way for them to get exactly what they need. And when you're talking to a prospect or selling in the process of selling at the end of that sales process, so when you're presenting your solution or talking them through what they're going to get, we want to be able to articulate that our solution is a mechanism to get them to the destination. They want the outcome of all the things that they've talked about in the discovery. That's what they want. Our product or service is just a way for them to get there. So the language that we use throughout that process of the match should be very much focused on outcomes. So like I say, the analogy that we use is, you want to sell the holiday destination. You want to sell the cocktail on the beach, the condensation dripping down, an ice cold beer in the sunshine. the sense and the destination. What we don't want to be selling is you have to go to the airport queue, you have to do the check-in, your baggage and everything like that, which are things that you have to do to get to the outcome, but the prospect only wants they want the destination, they want the outcome. So it's about saying the reason we do this is because it's the best way of getting you to the outcome. And then the net, the bonus round, is just that is how we retain customers. So it's a separate activity within itself, but it's really just to try to retain customers for as long as possible with activities through customer success. So whenever I'm talking about sales or specific parts, we can always put it into one of those buckets, which is either the hook, are you trying to get a meeting? The wedge, are you trying to understand the prospect's needs or motivations, or understand the cost of not doing anything where they are? Or the match, which is where we are them presenting our solution. That could be a demo, it could be a walkthrough of a proposal, it could just be a closing call, a presenting call, but it's where we're coupling what we know about the prospect and then matching it to hopefully give them exactly what they want and the outcome that they want, and lead them to believe that we are well placed to get them there. Right, so I'm just going to go in some of the slides. So I'm going to go into some core kind of thought processes, and some of these are like nuggets of information, but just explain the thought process while we're going. This is someone that explained this to me when it was a sales coach that I'd employed when I first started out and started to take sales really seriously. And they were talking about they were trying to get me to ask more questions, because in general, my natural state is one of which I quite like to be liked. I'm quite like outgoing and friendly, and I'm not naturally comfortable with asking questions or challenging people. And as a result, my discovery used to be very shallow. It used to be like a stone skimming on the surface. And a prospect would say something that clearly didn't make sense and was obviously masking something else, but I would never pick them up. I would never challenge them on it. And the sales coach at the time, he was trying to get me to ask more questions. And he said, you need to think about it like this. He's like, did you believe that we could help that prospect? And I was like, yeah, they were they were like completely in trouble. Yeah, they needed the service. I just didn't know why they didn't understand it. So, okay. And they say, try to think about it like this. If someone was in a burning house and their house was burning down, and you were trying to explain to them that their house was burning down, and they were saying to you, no, I actually think I'm fine, I actually think I'm all right, or I actually think I don't need to do anything, would you just let them? And it's like, oftentimes when we are dealing with prospects and they aren't able to process information, or they have a feeling of uncertainty, or perhaps the solution might be expensive, or they were comparing it to something else in their mind, they will say something, or they'll act or behave in a certain way that is inconsistent with what the logical best case scenario or the best way forward for them would be. So their actions are inconsistent with what would actually be best. In those situations, and what I've worked on is being able to be confident to guide the conversation in those questions, so that you diffuse what the prospect's thinking, but then ask them questions to help them see that actually, yes, they are in a house and it is in fire. I know you're thinking you're fine because you can't see any smoke, can you? No. Okay. Could you just come to the window? Yes. Okay. What do you see when you look down? I see a bit of smoke. Yes. Okay. Could you put your hand on the floorboards? Yes. Okay. What do you see? It's a bit warm. Okay. So we ask questions then, not in a combative way. You can never get in an argument with the customer, but there's always ways that we can help prospects to decide and get to the decision that's right for them. So what we're trying to do is to try and to move the prospect to a position where they can make an informed decision, and we can help them decide in a way that is right for them and what they want to do. There is a huge, I always like to think of it as like a huge elastic band that is pulling prospects back to the status quo. And often what happens is, because we can't get a prospect to the point where they can decide yes, they're a maybe, which is a no by default, because maybes are always no's as far as we're concerned. So it makes it doubly hard for us as salespeople, because there's three kind of decisions. There's a yes, no, or I might do it, but the might do it is a no for us. So our job as salespeople is to help them decide in a way that makes it easy for them to get enough information where they feel confident to say, yes, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it now. Because often what happens is that if they don't decide and they go into this pot of maybe, we all know that time kills deals. So it's about understanding what the prospect's concerns are, isolating those concerns, and then just helping them to decide yes. Again, we're dealing with prospects all the time where we're like, you want this, you just have to decide. Like, it doesn't make sense for you not to do this. And so if we imagine like this big elastic band, it's our job to create enough of a gap between where they are and where they want to get to, and create enough certainty by removing the uncertainty and the objections and the potential blockers, so that they feel, yeah, confident, I'm going to go ahead with it. I've spoken to a person who's coming on board at the end of the month, and they were saying that they, again, I was absolutely certain we could help. They had a burning issue. They'd wasted thousands on wasted sales on sales hires. They had zero sales process. They were trapped where they were because they couldn't find a way to acquire new customers. And everything that I talked through, he was like, yeah, this is exactly what I need. And then it got to the end of the call and the close, and you could instantly see the fear, like the uncertainty click in, and it was almost like a devil on his shoulder saying, hang on, you need to think about this. And he's like, oh, instantly it came out about, I need to think about it with time, because I've got some trips next week, and then I'm going away the week after that. And so I said to him, I said, can I just challenge you for a second? He said, yeah. I said, have you ever gone diving? He said, no. I was like, okay. Have you ever jumped off something high that scared you? He's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I went on holiday and I was watching my kids jump off a little thing into the sea on the marina in Menorca. And I watched one of them go up, and it was Stanley, and he looked over, and then he jumped straight away, and he jumped in. And I say, and then little Ada went up on a littler one, and she just stood, and then she looked back. And I was like, what do you think Ada ended up doing? And he's like, she didn't jump. I was like, no. I was like, because sometimes the longer that we dwell on decisions, the longer the fear sets in, then it stops us making a decision. So all we ask, and we'll completely reverse the risk, but we want to like completely draw a line in the sand, just commit to an onboarding. Make sure that you're drawing a land and sign and saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to commit. We'll pick the onboarding, we'll pay a deposit that you're comfortable with. And then if at any point you change your mind or decide this is a catastrophic decision, you can let us know after you've got the workshop. But it was just an example of how our internal dialogue will often come up and start to tell, oh yeah, maybe we don't do that. Oh, it's a lot of money to spend. Do we really want to be spending that on a sculpture in the garden? Oh, it sounds like a lot of effort. Do we really want to be moving forward with this? I'll have to get all this data. Prospects will tell, various little things will come up in their mind, and they'll stop us making the decision. It's our job to stop that happening and try to guide them to make the right decision. If you see, you'll see it'll seem like I'm flitting about because you've got very different sales cycles on the call. So there's one, just for context, one, Francesca sells very high-end sculptural slides and baths, and Adam and Ben sell a carbon efficiency certification solution for manufacturers of furniture. So one sale is very much about, we'll save you time, we'll get you to the point where you can answer tenders quickly and easily and efficiently, so you're not missing out on business. And then the other sale is very much a desire kind of conceptual, like status-based sale. And so there's the two different elements there, which are the big things, which is I want to stop. It's the fear of loss, which is the problem. Like I don't want to miss out on tenders. But then the other one is like, I really want this thing. It's like a desire based. Think about the discovery as an iceberg. And as I mentioned earlier, if you listen to average or poor discoveries, even if they're following a framework, what they'll tend to sound like is a stone skimming on the surface. So it'll be kind of one question to one question to one question to one question. And even though they might be about relevant areas, there's a very kind of methodical, shallow feel to them. What we want to try to do is to, when we find an area of importance or pain or disruption or motivation, rather than skimming along, we want to drill down into that to get beneath the iceberg, because that's where the real value and the real motivations occur. So often in business, if you're talking about a specific SaaS or a platforms sale, we'll tend to focus on problems. So understanding, and it might be a throwaway comment, but prospects always give these clues to things that they're concerned about. They say, yeah, I think we want to do something. We do want to do something about our tender response process. And it's a kind of alarm bell. It's like, okay, how do you mean? So you're getting them to loop back by asking, okay, let's expand on that. How do you mean? Okay, well, yeah, I think we lost a couple of tenders last year, or we went no bid because we were asked for information and then we weren't able to provide it. Okay, how many tenders? 2. Okay, and what were the value of those? X, Y, Z. Okay, and were they ones that you'd normally win with the prospects? Okay, and what was the impact on them? What's changed since? And you're funneling this prospect down from something that's a throwaway comment. You've got the ability then to really understand what's going on beneath the surface. An example in terms of the other side, the kind of conceptual, desire-based status sale is, okay, so why are you looking at this? Okay, well, we're kind of like really family orientated. Obviously, we really love the view there, but it feels like it's a bit empty. Okay, walk me through that. Well, we have parties every quarter and my wife really likes hosting. She really likes to kind of create a wow factor. We normally have sculptures. We paid for ice sculptures and things like that. I think, okay, why is that important? And you're just trying to understand more information than is on the surface, because you'll get deeper motivations and you'll understand what's actually driving the decision from that prospect. And when we go beneath the iceberg and get really high quality information, it allows us to sell that destination exponentially better than if we hadn't got that, because otherwise we're just kind of forced to sell in what we do or what it is, rather than the feeling and the sense and the emotional gain, what it means, the impact of what we're selling, if we've got better information about what they're looking to achieve. Similarly as well, if it was certainly in B2B, we're always trying to tie our solution onto a business priority. So the closer we can position the solution as a mechanism to help the business achieve their business goals, the easier it is for your champions to advocate and get the deal through. So understanding what's driving that, why have they got a mandate to increase sustainability, why are they looking at that, enables you to put a much more compelling business case as to why they should take action now. Okay, so little thing here, and this is our, like, in terms of the major sections, I'm just going into some things that will generally keep coming up. And this is one of the most powerful things in terms of a sales process and a conversational process with prospects is something called the consistency principle. And it talks about the 7 principles of influence. So it was a professor at Harvard who spent years and years and years analyzing what influences human behavior. And one of the things that is most powerful I've found in the sales process, certainly in terms of when we're speaking to prospects, is something called the consistency principle. And it goes like this: is like, if someone states out loud that they are going to behave in a specific way, they are much more likely to follow through with that in their behavior. And an example that I give, and Andy will be sick of hearing this story, but the example that they gave is they had 2 large cul-de-sacs in America. And the first cul-de-sac, they sent a group of people around to do a survey, and they said, they asked the residents if they would have a placard, a wooden sign in their garden saying, please take care of our families and children, young children playing, please drive slowly. And they asked the households if they would have one of these signs in their garden. And there was a small uptake. A couple of families did it because it was a fairly big sign. And the second cul-de-sac, what happened is they sent a group round a few days before, and they knocked on the door and they just said, hi, just a quick question. We're just doing a survey in the area. Could I ask, are you the type of person that values the safety of the people and the families, and especially the young children in this cul-de-sac? And of course, everyone said yes. And then a few days later, they went round and asked those same families if they'd have the wooden placard with the sign in front of the garden. And the uptake was around 4 times, because if someone states something out loud, they're much more likely to follow it through in behavior. Now, how it manifests, and I like to use this in the sales process, is that every interaction with someone in the sales process, I like to let the customer know what's going to happen, what's going to be the binary outcome at the end of the interaction, what they're going to get as a result of the interaction, and then I will ask if that's okay and get their buy-in to that process. Because if you can state what someone's going to get and then they get buy-in, then as we know, they're much more likely to be, I say compliant, I don't really like compliant as a word in this because it kind of suggests kind of manipulation, but they're much more likely to like be led through that process. And it makes it easy to reduce the instances where you're being ghosted. In order to get us to that point, I'm going to ask you a few things about your home environment or about your sustainability goals, and I'm going to put together a solution that best fits for that, and that'll be perfect. And then I'll walk you through that. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. And is that okay is the key thing, because it then gets buy-in and it gets the permission to have a much higher quality conversation. On Tuesday's call, we did a call review with someone had offered up as a very good sport, a conversation where he'd had it with the prospect, and it had started off a little bit awkward, and then it kind of unraveled to the prospect just hanging up. And I'm a big believer that you can always trace back and find the reasons. Prospects will always give you clues. But one of the things that stops having really awkward conversations is that strong frame at the beginning, which is, look, this is going to happen. I'm going to do it for your benefit. I'll need some information so I can help you. Is that okay? And then it just paves the way for a much more solid conversation throughout that. Okay, this is probably the simplest, easiest and quickest way that most sales teams I speak to can increase their deal velocity and increase their close rate, because it takes no skill, it just takes remembering, but it will significantly increase the deal velocity and also the close revenue. And it's that every call is bookended with 2 things. So at the beginning, you make it very clear what's going to happen on the call, what the prospect's going to get, and what's going to happen at the end of the call, and then get the tie-in using the consistency. So is that okay? And that ties the prospect into having a good quality conversation over the course of that call. And then at the end of the call, you say, okay, given what we said at the beginning of the call, the next step would be, and BFAM, which is at the end of the call, is book a meeting from a meeting. And it will eliminate 90% of the times that you are ghosted. Not quite 90%, but a lot of the times that you're ghosted unnecessarily. And it's just saying, look, given that we said at the back of the call, the next step would be X, Y, Z. Have you any objections at this stage? Okay, perfect. When is good for you? And we'll get that in the diary. And it means that you can schedule the meeting, you have it in the diary, so you're not then wondering whether the prospect is going to come back. You don't have to get your fishing rod out and fish around and try to get some dates after they've gone into the abyss. It just means that you can control the conversation. And this is especially effective in long sales cycles where there's lots of things that can happen and lots of touch points. Because as long as you can engineer the call and the reason for the call that is going to be something of benefit, then you can get it in the diary and you know that at least you're working towards something. Yes, they're much less likely to go off into the abyss if you've got that call booked in the diary. And then what you can also do is prior to that call is you can send them information and say, okay, just put together a 3D render of what the slide's going to look like, excited to show you on the call. So you're constantly teasing bits of information for them to come on the call. Or you can say, look, I put together a proposal. I think you're really going to like it. It includes a benefit that I think will fit perfectly with your sustainability goals. So you can tease them the benefit of the call, but the crucial bit is booking that meeting from that meeting. And it's not let's touch base, it's this is what's going to happen. So steel prices are really volatile at the moment. What I'd recommend is to make sure we have a touch point just in the diary. So if anything's changed, we can do it. Is that okay? Yeah, makes sense. Okay, given you got your AGM or your budget, renews it in April. Appreciate you got to speak to the board. Let's get something booked in. And it just allows you to control that sales conversation. It also means, especially when we are, for those founders on the call who are doing sales, or we're all busy, it just means that you don't have to think about setting a task in your thing, then sending an email, then sending a phone number, phone text when they haven't got back to you. It just makes it immensely easier. So that is the key. It's such a simple win. And to give you an idea, one of my sales cycles, when I first started the agency, we had a lead generation agency, and the sales cycle was like 6 calls, generally 6 or 7 calls that I would have with a customer to do that. And I don't know why, I had a really bizarre limiting belief that if we had the call on the Wednesday, I would never book it for the Thursday or Friday because I thought that was too pushy. So I'd always book it for the Monday or Tuesday. And if it was on a Monday, I would never book it before the Wednesday because, again, I thought that was too pushy. But if you think I was giving the prospect, or I was giving the deal an extra 2 days at every touch point, and over the course of 6 touch points, that's a significant amount. It's nearly 3 weeks of weekdays, of days that you're giving to that prospect. So you're giving yourself 10 months of the year to sell the same amount that you would have done 12. So you're making it like harder for you and giving yourself less time to close the business just because you don't want to book the meetings or do it. So that was one of the realizations. Someone taught me through that, and I was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. So now if I can book it in, I'll let the prospect drive it, but it'll be when would be appropriate and making sure that we're keeping momentum. No, it's slightly different to spin, which I really like. I do really like spin, but it's a framework of which as to attribute how we make decisions as human beings and how we place value. And I've not come across something that's so simple yet so powerful, and I apply it across all of our copy, all of our messaging, all of our emails, proposals, everything. And it goes like this. So on the top part of the equation, you have two things that you make as big as possible for the prospect. So on the top left, you have the dream outcome, and that is the outcome that the prospect gets from dealing with buying your product or buying your service or enrolling in your SaaS. And the dream outcome is as big as possible. So when we've talked about asking about deep questions in discovery to be able to create dissatisfaction and desire, then we're making the dream outcome as big as we possibly can. And given that, we make that as big as possible, but you might say, okay, well, ROI calculators are an amazing example. Like SaaS companies had like famous for having ROI calculators, and it said invest this and it's a 6,000% ROI, and he's like, okay, so why don't they buy? And it's because it's not enough just to say the dream outcome. What you also need to say is that they need to believe the perceived likelihood of achievement needs to be high as well. So it's like, I want this thing that you're promising, but how likely do I believe that I'm going to get that thing as a result of investing with you? And an example being is because there's lots of different levers that we pull within the sales process that you will be familiar with, but you won't have thought about it in this way. Case studies. Someone's a personal trainer and they'll say, Joe, I'm going to get you a six-pack. And it's like, okay, I want a six-pack. And there's two personal trainers. One of them has got loads of case studies. So the perceived likelihood of achievement for the one with case studies goes up in my mind. So I place more value on that personal trainer. Then another one has loads of case studies, but they're all case studies of bald men with beards in their 40s in the northern part of England. So that even becomes more specific, so that my perceived likelihood of success becomes even higher for that person, and that person could charge more money for me because I believe it's so specific to what I'm doing. If we can lower the risk and increase the perceived likelihood of achievement, it makes that number as big as possible. Risk should technically be on the bottom, but we make the perceived likelihood of achievement. Then on the bottom is the effort and sacrifice involved. So Ben, Adam, this is a huge one for you and should be littered across and will be littered across all of our messaging. But it's, okay, I want a six-pack. I believe that person's going to deliver it. But then one person is saying that I don't have to do anything that I don't want to. I don't only have to work out for 10 minutes a day and I can still eat dessert. The perceived effort in sacrifice is less, so I place more value on that offer, if that makes sense. And it's often one that's forgotten about when in deals, especially enterprise sales cycles, where the effort and sacrifice involved often goes unspoken, but if we're not explicit about how to get the result and what steps are needed, the prospect always defaults to the worst case scenario. It's that kind of, oh, look, I just haven't got time to think about that. And that's where we end up in the lake of maybe. Similarly to this, in terms of effort and sacrifice involved for your sales cycle, Francesca, this could manifest in a element like the builder or the contractors. That kind of, oh, I don't know about this, that's perceived effort and sacrifice in a way, because do they want to shoulder that responsibility? And then there's the time delay, which is, and I think this is probably less, it's the least relevant that I come across, but it works a lot in B2C, which is, if I do this, how quick is it for me to get the results? And we already touched on it yesterday, Adam and Ben, in terms of you can get an estimate for one of your products within 5 minutes. The reason within 5 minutes in the time it takes to make a coffee is powerful is because it's the time delay. You're shortening the gap between where they get what they want. And then put them all together, and then you've got the 4 pillars of where we increase value. So I'm thinking of kind of shuffling this, because I think perceived risk should be on the bottom as well. And I think that's probably more important than time delay in most sales cycles. But it's fascinating. And which is why, if you imagine liposuction, gives you the six-pack. The perceived likelihood of its success is incredible. There's no effort and sacrifice involved because you literally just go, and there's zero time delay because you've instantly got your six-pack. That's why it's the most expensive, or you can see the route to it being the most expensive. I love the value equation, and it's such a powerful piece of sales and marketing as a thought process. But I just thought it'd be good to kind of include it, because whilst it's not my methodology, it's really, really powerful and so useful when you're trying to analyze what you should put in copy, how you should position your deals. It's the effort and sacrifice is the killer, and it's the one that no one thinks about. And 99% of people don't think to address it in their proposals or the way they do it. And it's in the absence of explicitly saying what is needed to get the desired outcome. Often people default to it's a lot more effort and sacrifice than it actually is. And that's where they say, oh, I just can't be doing with that. That's all the spreadsheet. It's like, no, it's not. It's just, you just need to do this. And so it's that, and it'll manifest in unspoken conversations and feelings that we don't often hear in the sales conversations. And compounding. But an interesting thought is, if you imagine a sales process, like a very basic sales process, you have lead coming in to booked meeting. You have booked meeting to showed up. You have showed up meeting to I'm submitting a proposal. And then you have submitted a proposal to close deal. Just 4 stages. If you increase the conversion of customers by just 10% across 4 of those touch points, you increase the output by 46%. So you get 146% business from just increasing 4 areas by 10%, the conversion of each. So if you have a lead to meeting booked rate of 80%, if you get that to 88, doesn't seem too much of a shift. If you have a meeting booked to show up rate from 50 to 55%, the proposal rate from 20 just to 22%, and the close rate from 10% to 11%, just those tiny tweaks in compound to make a 46% increase in the business. And especially with long, complex sales cycles, often it can feel like you're shouting or you're tweaking things into a void, because the feedback loop isn't always instant. If you're on a call and you're practicing objection handling and discovery questions, then the feedback is instant. You can instantly feel. But over long, protracted sales cycles, tiny incremental improvements across each stage, getting that one person back to the call, that one person or that one builder to not put a spanner in the works or make them feel a little bit easier. All of those compound over long, complex sales cycles and make significant difference. So it's understanding what you can do to leverage and increase the conversion, and then making sure that you just follow the process and have a really good understanding. But I think that's one of the things that I try to give everyone is objectivity on what the best process is across each of the stages of the sales cycle. Because if you know what is going to give you the best chance of that prospect converting to the next stage, it enables you to tweak and refine to increase the chances that the prospect is going to pass to that next stage. And you only need to, because of the power of compounding, tiny incremental improvements make a big difference to the overall number. When I listen to deals that have been lost and people are saying, can you just review this? This prospect's not gone ahead. I thought they were a really good fit. We had a really good conversation. We had really good rapport, and then they didn't go ahead. There's never been an occasion where I've listened to the call and there haven't been clues as to why the prospect didn't go ahead. There's always clues in the language that they use or the ways that they think, or a vague question or something that didn't quite make sense. And whilst because it wasn't picked up on in the moment and in the sales process, it then manifested in a ghosting and just a deal that went dead. So I'm a big believer in whilst objection handling is fun for those who do enjoy it, and I'm really enjoying it at the moment in terms of I've got like a short one call close sales cycle, which is much more intense, and you've got the opportunity to overcome objections. It's far, 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 far easier to get the information up front and ask better questions so that you can then preempt objections in your collateral and your proposals. Because if you know, as an example, what alternatives people are considering, what competitors they're considering, or what they would be doing to solve that problem if it wasn't speaking to you, if you get that in discovery, it allows you to control the narrative in the proposal or the way that you present the solution. And the beauty of it is if you preempt a negative, it takes the sting out. So if you say, as an example, a common alternative to our solution would be marketing spend, as an example. And if I knew that someone would say, well, why would we spend on you, Joe, when we can just spend that money on ads and adverts? I say, okay, is that what you'd be considering as opposed to us? Yeah, I think so. Just get more leads. Okay. But then that gives me the information to put into the proposal, and you can control the narrative, because I can say things like, okay, now, and I will always put this in proposals, it's what you could do. And it's like, you could buy more leads. More leads will get you more conversations and more in the funnel. But effectively, whilst the sales process has flaws, it'd be like pouring water into an empty bucket. Whereas if you plug the holes in the bucket first, it then allows you to add more leads with confidence that you know you're going to get a return. And because I've owned the narrative on that, it's much more powerful than getting all the way through the sales process, putting the proposal together and then saying, oh yeah, but I think we might get more leads, in which case you've lost it, because then you're on the back foot. The reason I say zombies is because you can either kill them when they stand or where you first see them, or if you leave them, what will happen is you'll tend to get surprised by them later in the sales cycle. So it's about increasing the quality and being cynical a little bit in the first part of the discovery to understand what's going to stop the deal, rather than getting happy ears and thinking, oh yeah, I've got a really good I had a really good rapport, and missing something which then harms the deal later on. And that brings the end of the presentation. So it's the key things is the three different stages, which is the hook, the wedge, and the match. And we have very different behaviors and ways that we interact with the prospect at each of those stages. Splitting that up, discovery always comes before solution. So it's always the hook, the wedge, and the match. We always look to gather the information before we put our solution. We will try to help customers decide and shine a light on problems or ways of thinking, and guide the prospect to make a binary decision, which is yes or no. Because we know that the longer the prospect stays in maybe, the less likely it is that they're going to proceed. Then we will generally look to control the lead a prospect through a sales process, which makes them feel in control, not like they're being sold to. But we use the consistency principle and booking in next steps, which makes sense for the prospect, to make sure that we're guiding the prospect through a process in the shortest time possible. And we don't want to rush the sales cycle, but we want to make sure that we're gaining momentum with the sales cycle. And then increasing the quality of the information that we get so that we can understand what would stop a deal in discovery, so we can control the narrative and preempt that in our proposals. And that's it. So as an introduction, I hope there was elements of that which were insightful or perhaps new or you hadn't thought about before. And Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, and the book Influence, if you want to look into any of the further reading, if you want to geek out on the back of this call.